Looking at this portrait of a young Henry VIII, you see an athletic, highly educated Renaissance prince. But he was never actually supposed to be king. Born the Spare, Henry was destined for the church, until his older brother, Arthur, died suddenly at age 15. Overnight, a 10-year-old boy was thrust into the role of sole heir. The Tudor dynasty he inherited sat on highly unstable ground. The memory of the Wars of the Roses, decades of brutal civil war, was fresh. A male heir was a strict geopolitical necessity. Without a son to cement the bloodline, rival claimants could easily plunge England right back into chaos. This portrait introduces Catherine of Aragon, Arthur's widow. To secure a vital alliance with Spain, an 18-year-old Henry pragmatically married her shortly after taking the throne. For 15 years, the marriage thrived. Catherine was intelligent and highly capable, even successfully directing a war against Scotland while Henry was away in France. But despite 6 pregnancies, she produced only one surviving child, a daughter named Mary. In Henry's eyes, a daughter could not hold the fragile Tudor kingdom together. Desperately searching for a reason behind this lack of sons, Henry turned to the Bible. He fixated on a verse in Leviticus warning that a man who takes his brother's wife will remain childless. He convinced himself his marriage to Catherine was formally cursed by God. This biological vacuum slowly mutated Henry's standard royal anxiety into a dangerous obsession. Securing a male heir would dictate every decision he made for the rest of his life, no matter the cost. When the Pope refused to annul his marriage to Catherine so he could marry Anne Boleyn, Henry shattered 1,000 years of religious tradition. He broke England away from the Catholic Church entirely, declaring himself the supreme head of a newly formed Church of England. He married Anne in secret, and by September 1533, she gave birth to a healthy child. Everything Henry had sacrificed, his international standing and the religious order of his country, was riding on this moment. The child was a girl. Her name was Elizabeth. Knowing exactly what happened to Catherine of Aragon, Anne desperately needed to get pregnant again, but the subsequent years brought only miscarriages. Henry's patience evaporated. To clear the path for a new wife, his ministers manufactured a massive case of treason against Anne, accusing her of incest and plotting the king's death. This aerial view shows the Tower of London, where Anne was held prisoner. Within these walls, on May 19, 1536, she was executed on Tower Green by an expert French swordsman. It established a lethal rule. A queen's survival was strictly tied to her ability to produce a son. 11 days later, Henry married the submissive Jane Seymour. A year later, she finally gave him the prince he had demanded, a son named Edward. But the victory was brief. Jane developed a postpartum infection and died just 12 days after the birth. Henry finally had his son, but the mechanisms he built to get him, the executions, the break with Rome, and the purges of his own court, ensured that his long-sought heir was born into a kingdom ruled by fear rather than loyalty. This silhouette illustrates the physical decay Henry suffered in his later years. By his mid-40s, he was heavily obese and plagued by agonizing leg ulcers. As his waist expanded to over 50 inches, his temperament became increasingly paranoid and violent. In need of a political alliance, his ministers arranged a 4th marriage to a German princess, Anne of Cleves. Because Henry couldn't meet her in person, he relied on this portrait by Hans Holbein. When Anne actually arrived in England, Henry found her unattractive and immediately sought a way out. Anne of Cleves recognized the danger of resistance. When Henry asked for an annulment 6 months later, she agreed without a fight. In exchange for her cooperation, she was given massive estates, a generous income, and the title of the king's beloved sister. Within weeks of the annulment, the king became infatuated with a teenager named Catherine Howard. He showered his 5th wife with jewels, calling her his rose without a thorn. But Catherine miscalculated by continuing an affair with a gentleman of the king's chamber. When the affair was discovered, Henry acted with terrifying efficiency. Parliament simply passed a bill of attainder, declaring her guilty of treason. Without a formal trial, Catherine was beheaded before she turned 20. This wide shot of Hampton Court Palace sets the stage for his final marriage. At 52, Henry chose Catherine Parr to manage his household, nurse his infected leg, and provide the intellectual companionship he required in his final years. Catherine was a committed reformer and a published author. When conservative rivals at court plotted to have her arrested for heresy, she narrowly escaped by appearing before Henry and pleading for his superior wisdom. Most importantly, she successfully urged Henry to bring Mary and Elizabeth back to court. Henry died holding the power to define the law as he saw fit. Yet Catherine Parr leveraged her influence over that power to ensure his discarded daughters were legally restored to the line of succession, a move that would define England's future. Henry VIII died at 55 years old, firmly believing his legacy was secure. He had his male heir, an absolute monarchy, and a church that answered to no one but the crown. This Tudor family tree shows the immediate collapse of that security. Edward VI, the son Henry sacrificed so much to produce, was sickly from birth. He died at just 15 years old, leaving no heirs to carry on the male line. The line then defaulted to Mary, the daughter Henry had once declared illegitimate. She ruled for 5 years, violently attempting to reverse her father's Reformation and restore Catholicism, before she also died without a child. The final branch belonged to Elizabeth, the daughter of the executed Anne Boleyn. She would hold the throne for 45 years, presiding over a golden age of stability and exploration that outshone her father's reign. Henry VIII destroyed lives and fractured his nation's religion in a frantic, lifelong pursuit of a king. He died unaware that his actual legacy would be defined by the daughters he spent his life trying to replace.